What an awful position to put yourself in. Why? Why would you do that to yourself? Why?
Hiya folks, so it's Gavin here from Sovereign Empowerment, and I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Damien. Damien's a fellow warrior, like many of us, is aware of what's playing out in the world, and like many of us has applied his mind to the law, the real law. I wanted to do this interview for such a long time because he's been getting so much success. He's an avid student of the law. He knows quite a lot of successful litigants who will also be bringing onto this channel to interview, go through their cases, prove that this stuff is real, that you can win against the establishment. But before I do that, I want to bring in Damien now. We're going to share some war stories. And Damien, welcome first of all. And how you going? How's your day been?
All good, Gavin. Always a pleasure. I'm a little bit tired today. I was up till late doing some legal paperwork for an OAP, and that took me on a little bit of a journey. And I'll explain why. Both spiritual and legal. Now, obviously, we can go through the definitions of law and legal. One is defined as between two living parties. It's higher, whereas legal applies to the public servants, corporations, persons, etc. But you must know the legislation, because the parasitical organisations, corporate bodies, the wayward public servants, and they're wayward because they have no understanding of the processes that are playing out. At best, they're useful idiots. I don't believe that there's any nefarious underbelly other than they are repeaters, and they are repeating procedures and processes they do not understand. And that we'll cover a little bit later with a conversation, shall we say, with a parking warden. And then I spoke to their bosses at the parking enforcement team at my local council, and had a very interesting conversation for half an hour. And, rather than ranting, I managed to wake the lady up there, and she went off to do some homework, print off some PDFs of primary legislation.
It's brilliant.
This is how you do it. Right, with regards to, we'll call him George. He is the guy that basically is tasked with picking my special needs son up of a morning. And he comes to me for advice. He understands that I'm a law advocate, a good, capable student of the law, and I'm currently doing a paralegal course. And I'm always open to helping people. I'm truly service to others. Now, he came to me with a telecommunications company contract dispute, but it wasn't worded that way. It was just a letter saying that he had to pay £108 to this specific telecommunications company, because we're out there in the public domain. I shan't mention their name because this is ongoing, but I believe that the legal paperwork I've put together has shut them down. Now, I'll explain the situation. I'll explain the journey very quickly, because there's going to be a lot on your channel that favour the law, and there's going to be newbies. So the way it works, on the face of it, there is a letter saying that his contracted service ends at such and such a date. Now, because he no longer wanted the service, because for 8 weeks he was unable to obtain use of the service, they're charging him an exit fee. So I've said, George, this is how it works. At the moment, regardless of what's gone on and regardless of their service, you have entered into a legally binding agreement. You have ticked online a box that you've agreed to be bound by their terms and conditions. That's legally binding, right? People have to accept that, but there's always a way out. Now, I've said, so at the moment, George, you are the party that's in breach of contract. And if you don't pay this or contest it in the right way, then they can take you to court through a civil claim. And they'll be right to, even though it's unfair. This is what we will do. And I said, you're coming on the journey with me. Don't think for a fucking minute I'm going to waste the next 2 days reading through all the boring, necessary legislation to find the sections applicable to back your supporting case that they are in breach of contract. You are doing it with me. And I'll explain what I mean. It's 70 years old, bless it. But I said, right now, you are giving your power to me. I said, but I'm going to teach you how I do what I do. And it will sink in. And when it does, you'll empower yourself and you'll be in a position to help others. So this is what I'm going to do. I've explained to him the breach of contract, what it is, how it applies to him right now in this matter, and how we're going to flip it back on them. Because this is what we've got. You've got a good case. In the letter you've just shown me, we've got a complaint, a customer complaints reference. There's a 8 weeks old and it's unresolved, right? You can't use a specific part of their service. So that comes under digital content and unsatisfactory goods, okay? And improper service. So here's the legislation we need, the Customer Rights Act 2015, which was interesting because I've not looked at that piece of legislation, but I found that was what we need. I looked at the Goods of Sale Act, but a lot of that's been repealed and it's been put over to this Consumer Rights Act 2015. So thought, right, okay, well, let's come to the new act. This is what's relevant in this case. And we need to find the specific sections in this legislation that support his ability to put them in breach of contract. Okay, so I can't explain it any more simple than that. At the moment, he was in breach of contract because he has signed an agreement to be bound by their terms and conditions. That if he was going to exit early, well, that's the fee you pay. He's agreed to that. But if there's a breach of contract, which there currently is, as far as they can see, now with the legal paperwork I put together, no. You are in contravention of 3 sections, 3, not 1, 3 sections of this act protecting his consumer rights. You are in breach of contract. And here's the evidence, an unresolved complaint, 8 weeks, that's also gone to a governing body third party. So now we've got second witness, right? That's biblical. There we go.
There'll be people watching this that maybe have got their own disputes, similar disputes going on, where they know there's a contractual issue, but they don't necessarily know how to approach it, which obviously we're explaining now. But you just mentioned about the second witness and biblical principles. Can you explain to people that don't know what that even means or why we even need a second witness, what that's all about?
Well, you would for court. And I'll tell you why I'm not going to get too deep into that because that's more when we're looking into principles of equity. But in this, all we need is the legislation. And people are frightened of legislation. But the legislation has been put there to protect you. Legislation is there to govern corporations, corporate bodies, councils, public servants, but through their ignorance and through this duality, you've got the known laws and customs protected in primary legislation, and then you've got legislation, right? Running side by side, and legislation is necessary to govern our public servants, the civil service, local authorities, so on and so forth. But unfortunately, their understanding is that it applies to all of us when it doesn't.
And we don't have a choice in that, according to them.
And because people, I mean, if you speak to the average man on the street, they don't even know they've got rights. They wouldn't even know what a right is, let alone how to enforce them. And you enforce your rights not through spurious techniques and magic pens and silly paperwork and doing a dance. And, it's using their legislation against them, finding the relevant sections supporting your case, sending one notice. I send a notice cover letter, and that lays out a single or multiple cause of action, which I can then put into a lawsuit. The elements, the legislation supporting, evidencing what I'm saying, that they have breached or contravened, so that when enumerably they just put it straight up to the legal department, they go, oh, yeah, okay, well, he's given us the chance to mediate here, and he's left us in no doubt he can litigate. So if we ignore this notice, then he's just going to file a civil claim. That's it. That's all he's going to do. And then when I filed the civil claim, because I've given them 28 days to respond, I've given them the chance to remedy, to mediate. And the beauty of the Consumer Rights Act, it tells them that they have to give you a right of redress or a refund. There's so many different remedies in there, which is why it made interesting reading. So, and this is why I brought George on the journey. I said, if I've got to spend my fucking evening reading this shit, there's legislation to find, and this is how you do it, folks, you find the necessary sections supporting your argument. And I found the 3 sections I needed. They can't do anything now when they receive this than do what we've asked, because I just, okay, oh, you're going to ignore that? Okay, here's a civil claim then. And so the court will make them answer, because you file it into the court and you send them a copy, certified process, boom. So then the court will make them answer that within 28 days. And this is where people have gone wrong. I've seen these incredible processes where, I think it was 7 notices over 90 days. Now, it's all very well, and the content in those notices is very good. And the people behind them, they're very knowledgeable. And I'm not here to disparage anyone, because all I see is other like-minded folk pulling themselves out the fucking weeds we've been put in. And I commend them, their bravery, their wanton desire to fight back by any means possible. Unfortunately, they are,
using the wrong tools.
they're using the wrong tools. They're wasting their time. And this whole strawman hamster wheel has been repackaged, recycled 25 plus years. We've got an interview coming up from child strawman to adult lawman. It's the way we've got to go, guys. We've got to grow up. These processes don't help anybody. They don't serve anyone. So my one notice will get this guy the remedy he desires. What we've asked for, right? What I've put, you're clearly in breach of contract pursuant to sections 3, 49 and 54 of the Consumer Rights Act. You've left me no choice but to seek other options, blah. This being the case, I am willing to accept a remedy in the form of a waived exit fee and a rescission of contract. Now, what a rescission of contract is, it brings both parties back to the beginning before a contract was formed. So we'll have a waived exit fee and rescission of contract, and both parties can part ways respectfully. I'm a forgiving man and believe this to be fair to all parties concerned and would save the need to file a civil claim. You know, I've left them in no doubt. Look, guys, through a one-page cover letter notice, they know I've evidenced our position, their breach of contract. I've put in supporting legislation and the 3 sections required from that legislation to support what we're saying. I've then sourced, now this is the other thing, because he was given an address, a PO box address, okay? Now, the problem with that, and people say it's a non-contracting venue, yes and no. I use it with regards to driving, and I'll explain that, where I've ring-fenced my vehicle. I've done exactly the legal trickery that they've employed with us. Now, if you send it to the PO box address, they can say, well, we never received this. Put it straight in the bin, because you can't get anybody there to sign for something. So this is where you use the postal service. And there's no such thing as a postmaster general. So I'm not even going to get into that. That's another spurious claim, because I've never found anybody that can evidence that has worked. Talking utter gobbledygook in court.
The first party pays the third party 56% of computation upon injury of the second party, only if the second party admits equal responsibility to the first party.
The courts were set up for the layman. We were never taught how to use them. And as Ian Kirk rightly said, men fought, lived and died for the right to use those courts. We've got to grow up, read the rules of civil procedure, use them. Those courts are there for us. And believe you me, the guys that I speak to, the guys that, you know, these UK litigants that are quietly beavering away behind the scenes, getting success after success, aren't using any of these spurious techniques. They are drilling down on civil and criminal, and they know how to control a court, move a court through pleadings, petitions and motions, control the judge, keep the prosecution, keep the judge, keep the opposing lawyers, solicitors to the rule. It's simple when you know how, and your paperwork is the court. But people are led away doing all these ridiculous things they don't need to do. Now, my paperwork, look, for example, this will shut it down, 1 page, and it's very simple, and it's broken down simply for them. The CEO will receive that. I've sent it to their corporate headquarters in Manchester, and the public limited company head office to the CEO. They're the principal. She's named in an individual and official capacity. That's now making her liable for this. Take ownership. She wants the big bucks, right? She takes on the responsibility, and with that comes liability. You hold their feet to the fire. Now, I had to do the research because I had a PO box address. No, thank you. We're not using that. That's a non-contract. There's nobody there to sign for this. I want somebody to sign for this legal paperwork. So that's been sent to 2 offices, her personal email, and to the complaints department email. 4. I've got a paper trail. We'll have signatures with tracking numbers. And believe you me, he'll get a nice letter in a month's time saying, we've decided on this occasion to waive the fee, and we wish you every success in your new telecommunications contract with another company. Good luck and God bless. And we'll say thank you very much. This isn't difficult.
No, it really isn't. Can I just ask a question, Damien, just for those, again, that are maybe starting out on this journey? Now, obviously, for you already had a lot of foundational knowledge and knew where you needed to look and what you need to express to prove the breach of contract. If you were just beginning on this, would you suggest that, and again, I'm just asking you the question, I think I know the answer, but certainly you need a good foundational knowledge in contract law, don't you?
Yes.
For a lot of the matters that we have to deal with in this system, any number of different corporations, it largely comes down to contracts. Would you agree with that? That's the place to start. If you're kind of starting from ground zero, you don't really know anything yet, learn contract law.
I totally agree, and I would take that a step further, and I advocate the first thing anybody getting into this to do is go and buy the books that the law students use. So Law Express, this one is criminal law because it's relevant to a case that I'm putting together, a lovely lawsuit for my local authority, right? And they'll ship pickles when they receive that. But criminal law, tort law, contract law, those 3 books, Law Express, contract law, criminal law, tort law. If you just drill down on those 3, now I bought these for £3 each, secondhand off eBay. Now come on.
eBay is a great resource for these types of books. There's so many out there.
You haven't got to buy brand new. You haven't got to spend thousands of pounds. I've got a huge, comprehensive law library, and I've never spent more than £3 or £4. A book, I buy them second hand. Law students, once they're done with these, and I tell you what, the foundational knowledge they give you with contract law, with criminal law and tort law. And they're all relevant because your contract law, you'll get into contract disputes every day of your life and you can deal with them very quickly. So I've shown you one page, a notice cover letter, and I've set them up for a civil claim for punitive damages if they don't do what we're asking. Now, I've given them a lovely get out there. You haven't got to go to war with these people. You just say, hang on, we're not in breach of contract, you are. And this is the evidence, this is why. And these are the sections you've contravened of your own legislation. But I want to give you a way out. We're fair. We forgive you. What did Yeshua, Jesus, say? He said, you have to settle with your brother on the way to court. Well, what are we doing? Again, biblical principles. By the way, the Bible is a book of law. So, it's worth reading it again, not the chapter and verse that we were taught at school, actually reading it with your new eyes, your awakened eyes, and you'll see exactly what I'm saying. It's a book of contract, equity, trust. You've got everything in there, civil.
It's all in there. When you see it, you can't unsee it.
Can't.
There's a reason Charlie Boy, in his fake coronation oath a few weeks ago, but he did reaffirm the biblical principles. There's nothing to be sniffed at. So, okay, contract law, we've gone through the foundational knowledge. And what we're basic... Sorry, go on.
No, the only reason I interject before we come off of that, because I want to listen to your segue here, but tort law is very important because it deals with public grievances. It deals with the torts, and tort is wrongdoing or tortuous behaviour. So a behaviour of wrongdoing by your public servants, by the people at the school, the council, and so on and so forth. It's very important, tort law. Contract law, tort law, and then criminal law, because a lot of the aspects of the crimes they're committing against you, are civil and criminal.
Correct.
I've got, with regards to the local authority, just one of many criminal offences with regards to what you deal with, the illegitimate and unlawful council tax.
Well, actually, should we just talk about that now? You kind of segued into that. It's a nice little topic because a lot of people are dealing with the same things.
But they're not looking at it in the angles that I'm putting into my lawsuit. Right, let's give you some fresh eyes on that, some fresh impetus, because there's also another good fella. Now, Richard Vobes is putting out a lot of good material there, and they've got a Canadian guy on there that's actually, I've got 5 or 6 multiple causes of action against my council. This lawsuit is going to be so airtight, they will have no choice but to get me around the table and pay me off and come to an agreement of my choosing with regards to taking my property off the VOA listing and taking the meters. Because the other thing people have got to understand, with the legislation that they rely on, you've got all the services tied in. I think people have missed a trick there. You've got the gas, the water, and the electric acts are tied in with that, and they're tied in for a reason. So it doesn't just mean when you get off tax roll, and this is the true concept of privacy, which people aren't understanding. So there's a huge obsession at the minute with the world of private. Now, private can only be defined as 2 living beings being party to a contract that then the state and the public can't infringe on. So if you and I enter into a contract, the public cannot intervene. They can't even look at it. That's private. The concept of private, which people are so diligently trying to change their status and this, and they've got to stop being frightened of the all caps name and this, that, and the other. Again, you are never going to walk into a court of law and by pronouncing that you are a citizen, that you are your all caps name, they're not going to say that, okay, but you're our slave or we own you. That's never going to happen. happened. So it's completely irrelevant. The birth certificate. There may be some truth. Again, you may be. You're never going to prove that in a court of law, and a judge is never going to stand up and say we own you. I mean, how? Modern Slavery Act, for God's sake. You know, we can take them into equity and say, well, hang on, equity does not aid a volunteer. Here's a fucking invoice for 500 grand just for speaking to me. You know, I do not volunteer my services for free, and I believe that involuntary servitude is slavery. Well, we've just mentioned the Modern Slavery Act. People have to get away from this. They don't get jurisdiction over you because you identify with that name. And people have to drill down. Go on gov.uk, read the High Court jurisdiction rules, read the rules of civil procedure. Jurisdiction can be attained territorially, in personam, in rem. That's over your property. Again, this is very important with council tax. I've built up the case. I mean, I've been building up, it was always coming to a lawsuit. This is, it's obviously a lot of work to this, but I've covered every angle. But there seems to be a lot of angles other people aren't picking up on. If you read your basic tax laws, you can nail them just on that. I'm jumping around a bit, so let's sort out this concept of privacy. Privacy, the concept of, because you're never going to get a document saying, okay, we accept that you live in the private. It's a state of mind and a state of being. And I tell you how that happens. When your lawsuit is airtight and you've formed an agreement that they have, all parties, the local authority have taken you off the VOA listing, which they're able to do, the tax roll, and they send round the services and they take the meters off your property, the water, the gas, the electric. They can do that. All their legislation is tied in. Read it. Read the Local Government Finance Act 1992. It's all there. So, once you hit one, the pack of cards falls with one airtight lawsuit. And I've hit them from many angles. I'm not going to go through the entire suit, but that's privacy. When you have been recognised by your local authority as having a property that they have removed the meters, or you can no longer be billed, and they will inform those companies for you. The fact that they're deemed or implied, deemed contracts, which is a complete fraud anyway, but the council then take you off their tax roll, which they've got no right to have you on there, and the Valuation Office Agency listing, which again, and this is very interesting, this is where I've got all my supporting evidence of unlawful conversion, because the Land Registry made me a proprietor on my legal title, which is a business owner. I've got it in writing. Thank you very much to the Assistant Registrar. You've just given me evidence of unlawful conversion. I've got from the VOA listing that I am a taxable entity, named a taxpayer. Look up the tax rules. Look up what a taxpayer is. And it's a defined legal entity doing business and incorporated under the state. Well, sorry, I'm one of the sovereign people. That's who I am. I don't identify as that. That's not me. So I've more unlawful conversion. So you bump Land Registry, unlawful conversion. Here's the letter from their lawyer. I've got the evidence. Bang, the VOA. I've got the evidence. They've defined me as a taxpayer. There's a mistake. Now, the council, a resident. Well, do I look like a legal entity, a part of a political subdivision class? That's what a resident is. And a non-resident, which would mean I'd be outside of the state, but still a political class and subdivision, a legal entity. I'm not. You've got to drill down on what they're saying. So that's 3 exhibits right there.
Can I just come in very quickly before you carry on with that? We're making a really good point, and I say this a lot to people. When it's where do I start? Where do I start learning? And one of the things I always say is look at their legislation. Remember, they're obligated to perform by that legislation. We are not. Look through it, read it, and pick out the common words, the repetitive words like resident, all these different things, and then look into the meaning of the words. So if you've just started this journey and you're hearing Damien speak, you might be thinking like, this guy knows so much, I don't even know where to start with it. This is how he did it. This is how I've done it. You just start looking at the words, reading the acts, picking out those things and looking into the meaning. And the more you do that, the more that starts to sink into your consciousness, and you just start layering up your knowledge. Before you know it, you're doing exactly what Damien's doing right here. Sorry, Damien, I just wanted to come in here and explain that.
Right. I've gone back to the inner child. It's like, well, how are they doing that? Who says I'm that? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? You break it down and you have to unpick the puzzle. And the reason you have to unpick it, because they haven't got a fucking clue what they're doing.
Exactly.
There's not some nefarious CEO sat there, sort of, sort of cackling away, his brilliant master.
Stroking his white cat on his leather chair.
Yeah. That's not happening. These people have no idea what they're doing. They're just following processes. They don't know they're causing you harm, injury, and loss, which they are. Which also, I'll just jump back to George. I've explained that his inability to access his services has caused him harm, brackets emotional, distress, frustration. It doesn't have to be physical. Injury, again, this is important, brackets, economic damages and loss of service, emails. Those are the three tenets of common law: harm, injury, loss. And that's where you bring in the tort law. So anyway, sorry, I'll jump back. Where were we? We were on the council tax.
That's my fault. I interrupted and put you off your flow. So we were just talking about going through the acts and the repetitive words, and you were talking about. Yes. Anyway, carry on.
So now I've got exhibit to support my case of unlawful conversion. Okay, from three separate government agencies, executives. This is the really important thing, and this is something I picked up from our American compatriots, Alphonse, who's really drilling down on their version of council tax, which is municipal property tax. Now, he's rightly said, how does this authority filter down? This is really important. And again, nobody's been talking about this. If the legislator who creates legislation, if they have no taxable or ownership interest in your property, yeah, we're agreed on that. They're not taxing you, are they? For you living in your home? Then how can they confer that power to local government? So if central government can't do it, how can they confer that power to local government?
Exactly.
They can't. And so I had to find the loophole within that act, the local, because, you say you then freedom of information request, where are you guys? Right, you guys are causing me harm. Where do you derive the authority to do what you're doing? Oh, we get the authority from the local government finance act. Right, okay, well, I've read that 100 times. Now, the legislator doesn't have that authority, and they're central government, right? Judiciary, right? So they got no taxable or ownership interest or title or right in my property. How the fuck have you got authority or title or right in my property? Oh, hang on. It says here in your act that the authority you have is prescribed, which means, where you have to drill down on the words, it means you have long use and enjoyment of a right and title by presumption and assumption. That's their disclaimer. That's their loophole. So go, okay, so you don't actually have any right then. You don't have any title, because I've got the legal title. I've got equitable title, and I've got the right protected in primary legislation, the constitutional statutes. So what the fuck are you all doing? So now what are the offences they're committing? Well, and this is why I tell people not to be doing this promissory note, this except for value, because there's plenty of people languishing in prison in America. Because what people have missed with that, again, not disparaging groups, right? Think about it. And this is where you have to take an elevated 40,000 foot view. Just fucking think for a minute. Take a step back. If you're creating financial instruments in a statutory regulated environment, i.e. you are passing off promissory notes in the statutory public world, what are you doing? Think about it.
You're liable.
Of course you are. For what? Securities fraud and forgery. Think, right? Have you been given statutory powers? Are you a central bank? Has it been legislated that you can create promissory notes? If you look at the legislation, it's the central banking cartel that have statutory powers to create the promissory note, i.e. a £10 note, a £20 note, they're promissory notes. I promise to pay the bearer on demand. So why is Joe Blow creating promissory notes? Has he been given a statutory order? Has he been legislated that he can? See, you're coming down back into the weeds, into the statutory public world, and committing securities fraud and forgery, creating these financial instruments in the form of except for value. Well, who's given you the authority to do that? Haven't. So people have to really start thinking. It's common sense, guys. Come on. So this is what you do with the council. Another exhibit. Council tax bill demand. Now, note it's not an invoice for services rendered. It's a fucking bill. It's a demand. But what is that? What are they going to do with that? Are they going to monetize it? Therefore, it's a financial instrument. But hang on, we've just ascertained that they've got no right, title, ownership interest, taxable interest in my private property, because they believe it's commercial and they believe that I'm a resident. So having put them right with one cover letter, one notice, and outlining all the multiple causes of action, all the elements, so they can give that to the legal team, and they go, you've got a problem here. You need to sit around the table, because if he files that lawsuit, we can't have case law precedent, because 68 million people in this country will fucking sue. Every council, or certainly every householder, right? Don't be frightened of the terminology. So what have they done? They are guilty of creating financial instruments. Are they legislated? Do they have the statutory authority to create financial instruments? No, they're not a central bank. They've got no legal right or title within your property, because the legislator cannot confer something it doesn't have. The legislator hasn't got it. How the fuck have they got it? That's it. And it says in there that the authority they have is prescribed. I've explained what that is. Now look at all the other components. The offences that they are committing is fraud by false representation. That is statutory. And you've got, that's criminals. You go actus reus, mens rea. There's 4 elements.
I just interrupt you there, just very quickly. Just there are going to be people listening to this that have never heard those terminologies before.
I'll explain. Right, I can say it no simpler than this. Mens rea is criminal intent. It's your intention, or they call it a guilty mind. Actus reus is a guilty act. You've got mens rea, the intention. Have they planned to do that? You know, was there some guilt, some ill intent? The actus reus is. So look. Oh, I'm thinking about nicking that cup. Oh, I've actually nicked the cup. That's so mens rea, guilty mind, actus reus, guilty act. And you have to certainly, on the criminal side, if you file a criminal complaint, which again is easy to do, you've got these are your multiple causes of action. You've got to get the elements required. So there's 1 element with the actus reus, 3 elements with the mens rea. You get all 4 elements catalogued down in your paper, they're fucked. If you only get 3 or 4, it's not airtight. You can still win. You get 2 out of 4, they're going to want it to go to court because they'll contest it. But you get 4. This is what the jurisdictionary course teaches you. It teaches you cause of action, all the elements. Case over, you've won. They will not. They can't.
Before I forget, mate, sorry, I'm going to share the link to that course. We have no affiliation with these guys other than it's an amazing course. I'll share a link to that course in the description below this video.
It's not my course. It's a 36-year attorney called Dr. Frederick Graves that I'll be interviewing soon, that every successful litigant worldwide, and I'm part of many groups in the States, Canada, Australia, all over, or certainly all the quietly diligent, discerning UK litigants that have had all their success, the 2 over the Isle of Man that are 9-0 at the minute in wins, everyone has done jurisdictionary. And I'm ploughing my way through it now. I mean, I've learned so much, but the basic premise is on your multiple cause of action or your cause of action, all the elements required. So I've just explained on the criminal side, but I'm just giving people an idea of there's so many angles, so many ways to skin the cat. This is why my lawsuits are big, because I'm hitting them from every, I've given them nothing. No quarter. I'm hitting them from every angle.
If I could just come in there just to recap for people, just to kind of explain that, you know, how simple this actually needs to be, because where people go wrong is they're looking for the 3-step process or this process that does that. And one of the things you've got to get your head out of is there is no bloody process. Forget the process. Especially if you've been doing this, you'll realise that the councils know that these stuff are templated. They can see this stuff coming in time and time again, and they've got no obligation to reply, and they just ignore you. So what you've got to actually do is build your case. Get the evidence to support what you're actually claiming to be true. And so what Damien's done is what we started off with, is you start with the legislation, you read the legislation time and again, you pick out the words, you look at the meaning, don't rush, okay? And then you start to build your case. Data subject access requests, freedom of information requests are very useful tools to gain that evidence. Don't be scared of screwing things up. You don't have to be right or perfect with everything that you do. Sometimes it's good to just compose a DSO or something like that and do it to see what happens, because that's good feedback and good learning for you as well. So what Damien's showing you is he's done nothing other than read, research, pick out words, what's the meaning, and then he puts his stuff together. And the other thing I actually want to say, just on that note, because I get so many people, in fact, there's a video out there right now debunking the council tax scam, you know, and it's ridiculous, because those of us that can see, we know what's going on. And then they basically say things like, you've never won in court, no one goes to court, and blah, 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 blah. Listen, you're kind of stupid if you end up there. If you're doing it the way Damien and myself are professing to do it, and you build a watertight case, the smart people don't go to court. They get remedy out of court. Okay, so just want to clear that up. But anyway, Damien, back to you, my man.
The whole point of the jurisdictionary course is the fact is, if I've shown you very simplistically what I've done for George with a contract dispute. One notice, cover letter outlining causes of action or breach of contract, in this case, the supporting legislation, the sections that they've contravened, the harm, injury, loss. Go with this, or okay, if you're going to ignore it, you're going to still continue to cause him harm, you're going to keep sending him bills, you're not prepared to waive. It's mediate, then litigate. So you give them an opportunity, so that when you then file a claim, they can't say, well, we didn't know we were causing you harm. No, well, hang on, you did. I explained it very clearly, very nicely, and I gave you a way out. Yes, to one letter notice, but you've got to be able to enforce it. I'm not going to send 100 notices and say, well, I might, this is what I could do. No, it's, look, this is how it is, and this is what I will do. If you're going to ignore this, if you're not going to mediate, if you're not going to come to, settle with your brother on the way to court, if they can't adhere to that biblical principle, that's fine, because in a month's time you'll get a copy of the paperwork from the court. Okay, the whole point of jurisdictionary is your ability to enforce these notices, not to send more notices.
Which is what a lot of people tend to do, because I think the missing link for a lot of people is that they're now comprehending the notices and what's actually going on, but they lack the knowledge of, well, what do I do next? How do I take this thing further? And that's the purpose of jurisdictionary, and actually why I wanted to bring Damien on here today.
Teaching you to enforce that letter, that notice you have notified. The notices themselves, they've got no legal obligation to respond to, but it helps you when you then file your claim, because you tried to mediate. You come across as the reasonable party to the judge. You've got to dot the T's. You're building a case every time. So it's simple. One notice, cover letter.
So can I ask you, sorry, I didn't interrupt you there. No, talked about one element or one way that you're now dealing with a counsel, but I also know, well, we both know there's many ways to skin a cat in this, and there's so many things to pick apart. I know that you've also had success in removing liability for somebody else that you helped by purely focusing on the court itself, and you just shut the whole thing down. Can you explain how that happened? How did you approach that way?
That was a lot of legislation reading. Basically, look, we know the whole process is an absolute fraud. For any newbies, what the council are doing, it's very clever. They're hiring a venue, a room within the public court building, and setting up what can only be described as a private tribunal. It's like your local McDonald's bringing you in as an employee because you may have broken one of their rules and regulations. So they're treating you like an employee. It's a private tribunal, and they're railroading you through a quasi-administrative procedure. You've got no need or no right to be there, because it's been proved time and time again, the people that don't go, that then ring the court, will go in and say, right, can I have the case paperwork, please? Well, the court are not going to give it to you, because it'd be evidence of fraud, because they haven't followed any of the procedures. And this is what I used, laid out in the Magistrates Court Act 1980 or 81, the Court Act 2003, and the Senior Courts Act that I can't remember what date that is. So that's 3. See, I did a lot of digging, and before this individual went, we said, look, she won't go down unless, and I sent them a notice saying, this is what we expect, and it could only have come, it was laid out that it was somebody that was au fait, that understood the law and procedure and what they needed to follow. Now, I knew, and that the court is a fraud, that they're just hiring. It's no different to the local council hiring my lounge and setting up a private tribunal there. That's what they're doing. And then a fake liability order that they produced themselves. I mean, that's all been evidenced. The fraud is off the chart, but nobody seems to be able to hold them accountable. You do that through the courts, you'd sue them. I explained, look, I showed them all their liability. I said, this is what needs to happen. If she is going to come down there, you need to be following these procedures from this act, and this act, right? And as the JP, the Justice of the Clerk, has signed this paper, he's got to be there. So I found out who that was, found out that he was on a free roving contract, which is against his own legislation, by the way. So I then fired an email to him and said, well, you've got to be there as well, and you're liable if you're not. And this is the legislation that covers the Justice of the Peace Clerks. Digging. researching. I learned a hell of a lot just through that process. So he's now, because they're barrister level, he's now, oh shit, I've been caught with my hand in the jar. You know, I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing with this free roving self-employed. And that was ringing the court and saying, I need to speak to this individual, the clerk. This is the paperwork, and I need to know that they're going to be there on this day. Oh no, well, he doesn't work here because they cover all these different courts at this county, and they're on a self-employed. I said, hang on, that's not what their legislation says. Oh dear, thank you for that. Okay, and can you give me the email, please, to contact him? So I'm now holding his feet to the fire. He's fucked, right? I'm holding the court, their legal advisors, the legal team. I've got them, and this is what I expect when we get down there. Well, what did they do? They're like, well, we can't hold that here. Right, get her out of here. So it just shuts them down.
And all Damien's done there, he's gone into their own legislation. He's looked at the rules that govern their behaviour in the court and correlated that with what's actually playing out with the council tax, which breaches all of those different rules, and proved the scam and their personal liability. And that, I think that's the other main thing to sort of confirm here, guys, is stop going after these corporations. Every single individual in these corporations is liable for the things they do. They're the ones you're going after. And it's just as easy as Damien's saying here. You just research, you read the legislation, you look at what they're meant to be doing, you look at what's actually going on, and there you go. It's that simple.
It made their position untenable. They just kept moving it from court to court, and nobody wanted to deal with it because I was preempting. Right, okay, well, now this venue, we go from here to here. Right, there we go. Same thing.
It's like a hot potato, wasn't it? Though just no one wanted it, and in the end, it went away.
It's just funny enough. The council she was dealing with, the lady there, that I also, put down her personal liability, who was in charge of the revenue and that department. She said, "You've got to take my name off that paperwork. You've got to take it off the paper." She was in a real panic. So they know. I mean, heading back to the council tax, the other thing, and this is really important. Think about, people need to start reading up on tax laws. To think about the word council tax. Okay, what are the UK tax laws? Right, okay, so what can be taxed? Only commercial. Only commerce can be taxed, all right? People should know that. It's really important to know that. So, okay, if it's only commercial activity that can be taxed, what are those taxes? And they are duty, excise, and impost. What does that mean? Right, how does that apply to me? Am I importing or exporting my property? No. Not at all. I drink tea and I study law, and I'm in servitude to my children. That's voluntary servitude, and I'm very happy about that. They're my life. They're my life. Okay, so we've just discounted two taxes. So we've already explained that the legislator has no taxable interest or ownership interest or right or title in your property. So how can they confer that title, that right, that authority to the local government? They can't. Okay, and it even says that the authority they have is prescribed. So okay, well, let's look at the tax side of it. If only commerce can be taxed, and there's only three forms of tax that could be a duty placed upon you, right, import and exporting is a no-no in my house. That's not happening. Okay, I'm not set up as a business here. I sleep, eat, and shit here, right? Okay, they're not taxable rights, I'm afraid. Okay, and my right to exist is not taxable. So I'm not engaged in importing or exporting. So that's two of those three. You've got duty, excise, and impost. The third one is exercising a business privilege. Right. Okay. Am I registered with the council as a business? No. Am I licensed as a business with the council? No. So I've got proof that I'm not exercising a business privilege. So, okay, do I have a business status set up with the council? No. That's it. That's all, folks.
See how this is simple, guys. So anyone out there that's paying attention to the shills that are talking shit, listen to Damien. He's literally drawing the curtains back. It's all in their own bloody legislation. All the answers you need are in the legislation itself, because it's there for us. And what's happened is it's been inverted, and through their own ignorance, and I'd say sometimes it's not ignorance, but largely through their own ignorance, they believe we have no choice in these things, and they do what they do. It's for us to stand up, start comprehending that we have the power, start comprehending legislation, and learn how to sue them. That simple.
I've just totally flipped it back up the right way. That is how back in a private, non-commercial property. It's unlawful conversion. It's been done through 3 different subsidiaries of central government. And they always put the loophole in. It's a disclaimer, I believe, from the legislator, because they know they can't tax your rights. They can't tax your private property, so they put it in there. And I was told during the fraud that was Covidius Minimus, when I was down in Cornwall, and I just, again, divine synchronicity, I met up with a almost 30-year human rights lawyer. She was wonderful. She'd worked with Rainer Fulmick on the Deutsche Bank scandal. Again, I mean, people paying him. I mean, it's ridiculous. The man is giving his time, his love, his energy in helping people, educating, and in all legal matters. He went up against the German banking cartel and won. He went up against the behemoth that is Volkswagen, that was a Nazi corporation back in the day. Again, a giant, and won, and put together this COVID committee and this team of lawyers and doctors, and still gets panned and still gets put out there as a Freemason or whatever. I mean, come on, guys, grow up. What the fuck? But anyway, she was telling me, and it's always very important to glean knowledge from these people. She said, look, read the legislation. You'll find the loophole. And I took that on board. And I get it. There's nothing more boring than reading legislation. But at some point it will click and it becomes fun, because you'll find what you need. But it takes time. And it's very empowering, because the amount, look, I'll explain empowerment. And it's a state of mind. Governor like this, he knows me. I walked out of my local pound stretcher. And I was happened upon by a fucking parking wall who said, oh, here, Doc, I've done you a favour. I was just about to put a ticket on your car. I said, well, you can't do that. I said, I'll do you a favour. I said, I don't have to give you an invoice for 100,000 now. She said, what? I said, well, do you put fines on people's houses, on their front doors? Well, no, that would be trespassing. I said, well, that's private property. I said, well, so what gives you the right to put a fine, right, to even touch my property? Have you not read the legal notices in my car? Oh, we're told not to do that. I said, hold on then. I said, that's very rocky ground. I said, you're telling me that your management at the council that have acquired this land through the public purse have the statutory position of being holders of the public purse, right, have set up unlawfully a property and management acquisition site, their incorporated business, which has stepped outside of the Constitution. I won't get into that right now. That's what I said to her. I said, but you think you can trespass on private property, you can ignore and violate legal notices that will incur an invoice of 100,000 when I sue you. And I said, every court will support what I'm saying, not your management. And I said, besides, you think it's right that this land that the council have acquired through the public purse, which who owns the public purse? Well, we do. We haven't consented to the council owning this land. It's already stepped outside of the Constitution. It's acting ultra vires, which means without legal authority. And now you're going to try and fine me or charge me for the privilege of being on my own fucking land. Are you kidding me? So she went, well, I said, no, I'm finished with you. I said, first of all, I need the name of your manager. I'm going to tell you the offences you're committing the minute you touch my property. 2 torts, offence to person, offence to property. You're in a conspiracy with the management of the council, a conspiracy to defraud. That's a common law offence, indictable for 10 years, disobedience to statutes, because now you're violating my rights protected by 3 primary legislation: Bill of Rights, the Coronation Oath Act, and the Act of Settlement. Extortion. I said, you want me to continue? She said, no. The point is this. I know you're only doing your job, but A, that didn't work out very well for the Nazis because they didn't think either. And I said, B, you are being dressed up in a lovely grey uniform every day and being sent out to break the known laws of this land and violate and trespass on people's rights. And the reason you get away with it is because people are ignorant. Well, she couldn't get the fuck away quick enough. And I said, you remember this registration plate? And I said, you tell all your friends you keep the fuck away from my property.
And that, folks, is power.
And do you know what? I've seen them, because I make a point of not getting a ticket out of fucking principle, because we own that land and they leave it alone. I then went home incensed and I calmed down. I had a cup of tea and I had a fucking lovely chat with the lady there at the head of my local council's parking enforcement. And at the end of that conversation, I explained, matter of fact, how they were violating people's rights, the whole setup of the council, the corporate structure, how they are no longer acting with legal authority, how they've stepped outside of the Constitution, how their parking rules and regulations do not supersede primary legislation. You've got to tell it how it is, but very calmly and succinctly. And she was fascinated. She was engaged. She was lovely. And at the end of the half an hour conversation, she said, "You've given me a lot of homework." We had a lovely conversation. And I'm going to print all that stuff off and I'm going to learn it because I think it will empower me. So now we've got a light. We've got somebody awake in that office that's going, hang on, all these processes are fucking wrong. We're actually violating people's rights here. This is a problem. And that's how we break this spell.
Such a great point, mate. Isn't it? Just to interrupt you there, like there's so many people out there kind of like doing this with, you know, council workers, whoever they're tackling. And, you know, a lot of people go in with a lot of emotion, fully charged. This is all, you know, angry about what's going on. You know, to take Damien's point, you've got to understand a lot of these people are just ignorant. They don't know any better. So one of the most successful ways to deal with these things is just educate them. Know your stuff and educate them. And you'll be surprised about how many good people there are out there that will just drop it. Okay, so again, to the point of winning, you don't need courts, you don't need all the big fancy stuff. Sometimes it's just a case of doing what Damien's done and just have a chat with somebody.
I've now got an ally in that office rather than somebody that's, somebody I butt heads with. That's not the way. You're not going to get through to people that way.
Make friends, basically, isn't it? Make friends, build alliances.
Yes, I didn't go in there like a bull in a china shop. I sat down and I said, "Look, I think we need a chat." I said, "The problem is you guys are exposing yourself to a lot of liability. This is how and this is why." And then I evidenced everything I was saying. I mean, this is really important. And this is the beauty of law, this journey, how I'm able to wake people up, because I produce facts of law, substantive evidence. That's how I run my life. I don't have an opinion anymore. I back it with evidence. I back it with facts. Now, in a court of law, an opinion is hearsay. It's irrelevant. Struck off the record. You put in substantive evidence, facts in law. Wow. And I had this with the geoengineering business that we're seeing a lot of at the minute. I've managed to dig up a report, 155-page report. I sent you that from the House of Commons, which explains in great detail what they're doing, which is solar radiation management and the chemicals they're spraying. Now, I've been trying to get through to the mother of my children, who is half asleep, bless. And I think if I can't fucking wake her up, nobody will. I said, "Look, you don't trust what I've told you, and you don't even trust your own eyes, and that's dangerous. If you can't trust what you're seeing, that's an issue. That's a problem. How about this? House of Commons branded paper here. This is from Parliament. You don't believe this? What they're doing there is solar." And you realise that cognitive dissonance is they want to remain in that world of ignorant bliss. They can't cope with it.
It's very true.
You don't pursue it anymore. But I'm fortunately I'm bumping into so many different awakened souls. And I'll tell you, cognitive dissonance. I was at my son's school this morning. You'll love this. Now, I'll go on to this. Would be very helpful for mums, dads, parents. Labelling yourself as a parent does not give anybody jurisdiction. Okay, I've explained there's 3 ways that a court gets jurisdiction, and that's in personam, territorial, or in rem. And you need to look those up, do some homework. With regards to parent, and I'll explain, I've had this with the school. I had a holiday dispute. How dare I? As a father, I took my own property till the age of consent, which they are my property, till the age of consent, the age of majority, it is in law. My children, who I love and hold dear, I took them on holiday during term time. Oh, but big problem to the school, who sent me a lovely thing saying that I didn't have their permission. I said, "Well, thank you, but I don't need your permission. I notified you as a courtesy, but I didn't seek your permission. Let's make that clear." They didn't like that, but that's standing in your authority. I was polite but firm. So then they sent me I suppose what they would proclaim to be a legal notice, saying, "Well, because I didn't have their permission, and because the children can't be out of school, as per government guidelines, which aren't law, by the way, it's guidelines, and pursuant to Section 7 of the Education Act 1996, blah blah blah, they CC'd in the Education Welfare Officer." Fuck knows who she is. Never met her, but I'm sure she ran for the hills when they got my legal paperwork. But I'll explain. So this is parents. This is how you stand in your authority. And this was a very interesting process because they cited Section 7 of the Education Act. They said you have a legal obligation to have your children in an education setting, and then this is the piece to resistance, or otherwise. So in the 2-page legal document I sent back, I said, this act that you've cited, you haven't read it, have you? You don't read it because, and there's the disclaimer, there's the loophole, because the legislator knows they can't tell you what you do with your children. Again, your property, those rights are protected in constitutional primary legislation. Okay? What is the Education Act 1996? It's secondary legislation. So if you don't know any better, you think, oh dear, they've got me there. Oh, yeah, no, I'm going to get a fine. Oh, I better pay that. Yeah. Because you don't know you've got rights and you don't know how to enforce them. Well, hang on, if secondary legislation is repugnant to primary legislation, then this is illegitimate and void. It can't violate your rights. And the disclaimer, the loophole in that very section, I said, well, this very section that you've cited to me says in an education setting or otherwise. Now let's define that word. It's ambiguous. That's saying that I can educate them at home or in any setting I choose. So if I choose to take them on holiday and educate them there, what are you going to do? Because this says I can. So I've now turned the legislation they've cited against them. Yes. I then cited the torts they were committing as public servants, their liability, the violation of my right, deprivation of rights under colour of law, i.e. secondary legislation. I explained the primary statutes, what they are, what they mean, the difference between lawful and legal. I went through the whole thing. It was a real education for them. No defiance. It was no anger. I said, I'm going to take the emotion out of this. I said, because I've got a good relationship with all the teachers there and all of you. I was very diplomatic. I know my rights and I know how to enforce them. And this is how it's going to go. And this is all my supporting evidence. This is everything backing up what I'm saying. Yes, these are facts in law. They have an opinion of their authority. And I explained, I CC'd in the Education Welfare Officer who I had no dealings with. And I explained to her, I said, if you find me, you're breaking the law. And this is why. This is the Bill of Rights. No fine or forfeiture without a conviction in front of a jury, otherwise illegitimate and void. It says clearly there. It is my understanding that the council and the school are not a judicial court of law, and you're not following due process of law. So therefore, how can you fine me? And you can call this fine whatever you like, PCN, a fucking this, that, and the other. It's still a fine. And we got the Metric Martyrs case. We got Betty Boothroyd explaining, Speaker of the House, there is legislation, there is case law that proves that a PCN is a fine. They tried to get round that just with a clever play on words. So they had an education. Did I get fined? No. Have I had any issues with the school? No, because if they pursued it, had I got fined, I would have slapped them all with a lawsuit. And when I got the settlement, I would have taken the children out of school during term time again and took them on holiday with the settlement. And said, right, we'll have another go.
It's actually, when you get into this, folks, it is fun because you realise how much power you really have, and they have none. They literally have none. And it's just about going through the legislation, understanding your rights, read up on the Bill of Rights and those older constitutional statutes. I know there's arguments about all of that, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're just talking about simply everyone's liable and how you sue them using their own legislation against them. It's that simple. Now, we've been on here over an hour now, Damien, so I'm thinking we should wrap this one up. It's a long video and there's a lot to take in here. What we're going to just say now, just leave you this isn't going to be the last time you see Damien. Damien is going to be interviewing, and has already done so actually, a number of very successful UK litigants that are walking the walk, doing the things that we're talking about here. One of which is it 9-0? He's got 9 wins to 0
yes.
Suing these different people. So these folks are going to be on the channel, really just talking through their own experiences of what they've done. We want to just cut through a lot of the noise that's going on out there to just keep you guys focused on your power, what you can do, and actually how simple it is to do this stuff. Damien's going to be doing a number of interviews now with these different people. They'll all be going up on the channel. Obviously, you guys are going to have 1,000,001 questions as well. And as we start getting more and more successes, they'll be here on the channel too. Our aim now is to share the information of how to build your own lawsuits, your own claims, whether they be civil or criminal, against these individuals that are liable for the things they're doing to you. Damien, do you want to say anything just to wrap that up?
Get yourself a foundation of knowledge. Start with the Law Express books, criminal law, tort law, contract law. Read those books. It gives you a fantastic foundation. You haven't got to spend a lot of money. And then you must, if you want to, it's all very well with these notices. It's having the ability to enforce those notices. You need one notice cover letter. You outline all the facts in law supporting you and the fact that you leave them in no doubt when their legal team look at it, they go, Yeah, we got a good one here. We got a live one. We're going to get sued. One notice. Okay, we don't have a legal obligation, but I think, look, he's given us a way out. It's been very amicable here. Just get him away. Do what they ask. Otherwise, they're going to file the claim. It's that simple. It's one notice, file a suit. But you've already laid out everything within that notice that's going to go in your suit. The only way that we've all learned how to put together lawsuits is the jurisdictionary course, right? It's an American course. The first thing, it's American. No, yes, the legal system is the same worldwide. And you can use their Supreme Court rulings and what have you. A lot of their rulings are applicable, but they won't hold as much weight as the case law here. So it's just using the methods you learn from jurisdictionary. It's about £200. It's a good favourable exchange rate. You get the course for 12 months. You could realistically do it in a month. Do it over 3 to 6 months and go over it. And it would teach you court procedures. It's all relevant here. Everybody in the UK, these army of litigants quietly beavering away diligently in the background, have all done the course. All the American heavyweights, Canada, worldwide have done this course. Steve Emerson, who has over 40 million in settlements, a man who could truly call himself private. He's got 40 properties off their property tax roll and the meters taken off. In fact, the police, the code inspectors, the enforcement there won't go within 3 blocks of any of his property because they know he'll sue them. That's the power. That's how you get these people to leave you the fuck alone. Lawsuits. And if your suit is airtight, which jurisdictionary will teach you, okay, how to put the paperwork together, all the elements required, the causes of action, get it airtight. So the judge has got nothing to do other than preside in your favour, how to control the court, how to hold the judge to the rules, production and discovery methods. If you're defending, well, you say, well, hang on, you've just shown us you've got nothing. Well, you watch how quickly the Crown prosecution then take the case out of the court so you don't counterclaim against them. That's the power. People have got to stop fucking around. With all these spurious techniques and fucking fraudulent promissory notes, everything else, the mind boggles. And look, I've been there. I started down. I got deceived. There might be an element of truth to all of it, but it doesn't help you. I've seen groups, brave groups, likable groups that, and I think the world of these people. These are our brothers and sisters. These are divine souls standing in their power, but they're firing off all these notices without the ability to enforce them. And it's almost like then they're waiting, they're barricading their door and waiting for the fucking door to go in. Wow, what an awful position to put yourself in. Why would you do that to yourself? Why?
Exactly it, mate. That's exactly it. And so I think we'll just, on that note, guys, keep it simple, I think is the moral of the story. Keep it simple. Read the legislation. It's all there for your benefit. It all works against them. Educate them as to what they're doing and just comprehend you have all the power and stand on your rights. And I think with that said, if this video resonates with you, if you've made it this far to the very end and you want to see any particular type of information, leave some comments below in the description. As I say, I'll leave the URL for the jurisdictionary course. I've never spoken to the guys, neither has Damien, got nothing to do with us, but it's an amazing course and the knowledge is well worthwhile. It's a worthy investment, especially for like £200 or whatever it would be. And we'll see you on the next one. Oh, sorry, go on.
It's 200 quid. Now, people have to think, how much do you pay if you go to college or university?
I mean, you would never get the level of knowledge and training in any type of law school. This course is mind-blowing. It's amazing, guys. It's well worth going through. And I've never seen anything else out there like it, to be frank.
And I'll add one last thing. This is really important to all the parents out there. Just remember this. Through the process of registering your child to the school, they will never, ever be able to provide evidence that you have A, relinquished your rights, B, relinquished your son's rights, C, given the school power of attorney over your child, or signed a contract that you are willing to be bound by the terms and conditions of the Education Act 1996. Now, when you understand that, when that sinks in, you know that. Stop being frightened of these processes. How can they have authority over you? They can't. Show me, ask the question, where in the registration process did I relinquish my right or give you power of attorney over my son? Show me, where did I agree to be bound by the terms and conditions of this act that governs you, not me? Understand, let it sink in. You have the power. Stop letting them flip it upside down onto you. We're here to flip the world back the right way round. That's what we're here to do.
Exactly that. Damien, thank you, my man. I appreciate it. Folks watching, if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
God bless.